Welcome back to Gruber Power Hour. I am Pete Gruber,
And I'm Claude Dixon.
and today we have an image for you to review behind us here because we're going to be talking about MSHA training and mining safety issues, all certifications that Gruber Power Services field engineers have had to go through. And what we allowed AI to do in this case was do a picture in a mine, open pit mine with earth-moving machinery. And this is what it came up with. And we were pretty impressed with that.
Yeah, I told Pete when I saw this, I go, that's the first AI generated image that I actually have bought into.
Yeah?
It's amazing if you look at it. And by the way, if you look at it real closely up on the top left, those are UFOs. Okay, just so
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
those are UFOs up there. And I think Pete wrote those in.
Well, AI does take artistic privileges at times, and it does hallucinate at times. And for those of you that are familiar with this level of earth-moving machinery, you'll probably see some imperfections that we don't recognize. But AI does its best to create the whimsical images that it thinks that you want.
Yeah, and I'm not sure because Pete and I are blocking it right now, but if you
Yeah, I'm gonna
look,
pull it up.
yeah, if you look down on the surface level there, you see human beings.
Hmm.
And you can see how massive this earth mover is in comparison to those human beings and, the safety and regulations that are involved with, being able to go into a mine. And we're going to get into that, talk about that a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, the scale is quite accurate here. I've stood next to machinery this large in the open pit mines in northern Arizona, and it's something that you don't normally experience because they're not the kind of vehicles you're going to see on the streets or the freeways.
That's right.
They actually have to transport these in chunks and bits and pieces and construct them on site.
Yeah. I mean, you see a lot of these now all lined up heading north here in Arizona because they're expanding I-17 finally. But there's a tremendous amount of earth moving equipment just like this along the highway.
Very
Pretty
cool.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Jesse, I want to hit that form factor slide one more time because we had a few people ask us how come we didn't communicate the results of who won that contest. So I want to jump back to that image real quick and then we'll move on.
All right, I'm pulling that up right now.
Okay. The form factor to the far right, 1. Form factor E. I guess everybody wanted a more robust type system that could take a lot more power spikes than form factor D. You see form factor D there, the little guy there. The one next to him is more robust, but let me tell you something. Check your energy bill once he gets up and running because that particular system does not have economy. Any comments on that, Pete?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, you look at Mark there. Mark is much more robust than I am. So his body form, he's going to be able to take more spikes,
Gotcha. Okay.
more shots, but he doesn't have an economy mode,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because he's carrying a little bit more weight than, say, you
Mm-hmm.
next to you. So that's going to cost a lot more to carry that weight, don't you think, in energy?
That part I understand, yes.
Yeah.
Mark, are you watching? We'd love to have you chime in about the discussion about your body.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. All right, let's move on to the image that you see there. For those of you who don't know in the audience, we have a field service team here at Gruber. And before they can set site or foot on some of the sites that we service, there's certifications and clearances and badging requirements that take place. The most extensive area is the mines. We service 8 mines here in the state of Arizona and 1 in Colorado. The one in Colorado is actually on the top of a mountain. And you can imagine that when you think of Colorado, there's a lot of tall mountains there. MSHA is the biggest certification, the most extensive one that our field engineers have to go through in order to set foot on a mine. And what that stands for is Mine Safety and Health Administration. The actual code is 48. And what 48 references is the type of certification. Right here, this is an above ground certification. So none of the work that we do is underground. Our people are all up top working. Whole different scenario if you're going to be underground as far as safety requirements and things that you have to be trained on. It's a 24-hour course, so it's not something that is done at the mine itself. It's actually done downtown at their headquarters, Pete. That's where Freeport's headquarters are at. And they go there, they go inside, and they're in a classroom for 3 days, 24 hours of training. And that training expires every year. Every year. And they have to go back and do a refresher course, which is 8 hours. So a lot less time consuming. They go back to recertify. Freeport, the mines are very strict on that. They check that. You got to have that badging on your person before you set foot in there. Some of the things that we actually are subjected to, not every mine is alike. So when I talk about some of these certifications like site specific, that doesn't get you on all mines. There's actually a different site specific training class that you would have to take for each of those 8 mines because they're all different. You have one that's reclamation, you have one that focuses on minerals, you have one that's a smelter, one that's acid. So the training courses are different and the expectations on how you conduct yourself are different from a regulation standpoint.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, one of the observations that I can make is we have a lot of mining in the state of Arizona. In fact, there were the 4 C's, and somebody's going to have to help me here because I can remember 3 C's that are attached to Arizona: copper, cattle, citrus. What was the 4th one, guys? 4th C in Arizona. They taught us this in grammar.
Did you say citrus?
I did say citrus, yeah.
I think it's Commonwealth.
Don't know. But anyway, that's why we have customers here in the state of Arizona, at least, that require us to go out to mines and have some of this level of safety training. And copper mining is pretty big in Arizona.
Yeah, it looks like we have a comment here or a question on that image, Pete. I can't answer that one. That's a transformer tractor, right, from Flying Solo.
Well, it's whatever AI imagined my prompt and interpreted my prompt to be. And what I asked for was a large open pit mine with earth-moving machinery. And I didn't ask for the UFOs and the guys standing in the foreground, but I think that provides scale. The UFOs, I'm not sure what AI was thinking there, although it did ignite Claude's interest.
Yes, it did. Thank you for that question. Back on just the mining for a minute, I talked about MSHA. What that entails just from a course standpoint is, it talks through miners' rights. It talks through self-rescue, respiration. And remember, this is all above ground stuff. I'm spewing out to you right now. Transportation and communication, escape and emergency evacuation. You look at that image right there. Imagine if they didn't have that in place or they weren't training people on how to get out of there in an emergency situation. You can see that there would be chaos. And if you go to OSHA, if you just go to OSHA and you type in mine safety and you just look at safety records, there are fatalities in mines every single year, all over the world. People are dying in these places. So it's absolutely critical that we steward our people going down there and make sure that they have the right training. The other thing too is firefighting. There's fires down there, there's furnaces, that type of thing, ground control, hazard recognition. And the other thing I didn't talk to you about that I want to mention is OSHA. The mines actually require you to go through OSHA 30 training. And I've done OSHA 10 and it took me a day to do OSHA 10, but OSHA 30 is a week-long class, and you have to sit there. It's not something that you can just do when you want to. You got to sit there and it corrects itself. It makes you do it. And it's like a week long. It's like a 40-hour scenario there at your desk.
Interesting.
Yes. And that is also a requirement before you can set foot in a mine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for a business that's in business to support customers like this, these kind of certifications are absolutely vital. You're not going to be able to close any type of business unless you've paid your dues, you've gone through this training, and like you said, it's not one time. It's not like a driver's license and, that's the end of the story. You have to re-audit and do this every year, you were saying?
Yes. And, that's a great point because switching gears real quick to TSMC, there's a lot of trade stacking. We've done work over there, battery jobs over there. There's a lot of trade stacking going on. And what that means, For those of you who don't know what trade stacking is that there's various types of work going on: welding, scaffolding, battery replacements, conduit being run, forklifts everywhere, people everywhere. So the safety requirements are absolutely off the chart. We actually had to do a huge safety orientation over there before we could set foot there. Badging, all that.
Staying with that vein for a moment, for businesses that are interested in having customers like this, a certain level of safety record is absolutely vital.
Yes.
And we learned that the hard way years ago. If you let your safety rating begin to slip, suddenly you're faced with the fact that there's certain kind of business that is not available to you anymore.
They won't even talk to you.
Because these customers look at your safety rating and they then decide, you're disqualified.
Right.
Until that, FMR rating comes down to a certain level.
That's correct. Less than 1.
Right. And then the final part of this is it gets very expensive, not just from the training standpoint that you have to send people for days at a time, but if you're on the wrong side of a safety rating, your insurance costs go sky high.
Right. And, no one wants that. The objective is to keep your employees safe anyway.
And uninjured, yes.
Yes, and exactly. get them into the mindset of awareness, and that's what's worked for us here. Yeah. So we've got a few more questions here, Pete.
All right.
Slim Jim from, where's that? From
he doesn't say where he's coming in from.
He's from YouTube. All comments so far from YouTube.
Oh, they're YouTube comments. Okay. All right. And the question that Slim Jim poses is, are the requirements for mines more difficult to work in than private industry, than your doctor's office, than even manufacturing facilities, mid-size? Yes, they are different. They're far more stringent because you have such an elevated risk for safety. Now, large manufacturing facilities like Intel, for example, TSMC, they have a wide range of, in fact, you can probably talk about this because you guys have gone through a lot of this.
And what are you referencing?
Well, the type of safety requirements that the large manufacturers, we've been talking about mines, but, the large, even the electronic manufacturing facilities.
Yes, the main thing that they focus on there is the trade stacking, because 99% of where we go work, it's just us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're in a room. We're by ourselves. We made communication with the customer. But at this site, you have various companies. There's hundreds of companies, subcontractors working over there with various types of vehicles. There's inclines, declines, mud, dust, multiple levels, cords running everywhere. So the focus in the orientation was really, hey, you know what? You're walking into basically a hornet's nest here if you're not aware due to the trade stacking. The other thing that they spent a lot of time with was wildlife. Think about it. How many billions did they spend over there in that investment? 40 billion?
So far. Yeah.
Well, guess what? That used to be a desert.
Yeah.
Okay, so you disrupted all of these animals, all of these rattlesnakes, coyotes, all sorts of things, scorpions, Gila monsters, and they spent like an hour just getting us up to speed on the do's and don'ts when it comes to wildlife and what to look for.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's like, they had a row of 100 outhouses, and they said, hey, you know what? When you open that door, you better open that door and be aware of what's going on in there, because they found a couple of rattlesnakes in there, that type of thing.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Very, very interesting, very complex, a lot going on over there.
I was unfamiliar with the term trade stacking, but I've got a visual now. If you're working in a construction site, even though you may be doing data cabling, the electrician next to you may be up on a scissor lift running around with that.
That's correct.
People up on ladders.
Yes.
People welding, so you have, visual protection that is required.
Now, we figured that one out really, really quick, and we did all the work at night because it was less busy, but still the remnants of trade stacking was all there. It wasn't like a smooth in and out. You have your pallet jack, your forklift, you go in there, it wasn't like that at all. Because there were cords, scaffolding put up. In some cases, we actually had to move the scaffolding out of the way just to clear the path to the cabinet that we were working on. Just a different type of scenario. Bags, it was interesting. Let me put it that way. Very interesting.
And for those of you unfamiliar with TSMC, the acronym is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, and I forget what the C stands for.
Yeah,
but
the largest in the world.
the largest in the world, and unfortunately, it's in an area of the world currently that is contested. It's in Taiwan, and no one's really sure whether Taiwan's going to turn into Ukraine, with the Chinese deciding that they're going to recapture the territory, which they felt was theirs in the first place. And of course, once the Chinese government gets involved, private industry may change. They may privatize. They may. So the risk is huge, and the whole world is actually dependent on chips coming out of TSMC.
That's correct. That's correct.
So the U.S. government had the foresight to create a second version of TSMC. And fortunately, they chose Arizona, not too far from us, actually. What is it, like 20 miles away or something?
Yeah, 13 minutes from where we're sitting right now. The other thing is the culture war that's going on over there right now. The clash with the American worker and the expectations that the American worker has as far as how we work in terms of time. You know, the Taiwanese philosophy is, hey, you know what? I'm paying you X, but you're going to work until the job is done. You know, that's not the American mentality.
No, we trade dollars for hours.
Yes, yes. So that whole thing, if you read up on it, you know, if you're on current events and you read up on it, that culture war is going on as we speak, and they're having a tough time filling jobs out there with American workers. So they're having to bringing in folks from Taiwan to fill those jobs.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot going on out there. I think we got the answer to the other C up there, Pete.
Climate. Thank you, Starseed. Yes, in response to the 4 C's. So we've got citrus, copper, climate, and cattle. All right, Scrooge McDuck. Welcome, Scrooge McDuck. We appreciate you joining us from YouTube. Well, that's what it says. He says, or she, could be a she too. No, Scrooge was a he. That's right. It was Daisy Duck. All right. So Scrooge is a he.
No, it was Daisy Duke, Pete. Come on.
I see where your mind's going. He says, what kind of above ground battery UPS applications are there at mining sites? Well, you know, I can answer part of that because as I was telling Claude just before the session, we used to have a DEC 11, I think it was 1134, 1140 computer up in Bagdad, Arizona. Bagdad is up north, but it's way out in the boonies. And it's typically where mining takes place. It's not going to be typically near a residential area. But in order to get there, we used to drive from downtown Phoenix up to Deer Valley Air Park, and Bagdad, or at that time Phelps Dodge, had a private plane. And they used to fly us into Bagdad because the roads were basically impassable. And what typically happens is you've got your open pit mining operation, but then you have admin offices located off the, kind of off the beaten path. And that's where the staff is that runs operations. That's where the control center was fundamentally. And so you have computers there. And of course, being remote like that and having spotty power, critical power and clean power was absolutely vital to keep this equipment running.
Yes. And I think that question, hey, Jesse, are you able to go back to that?
Richard, you scroll it back.
Yeah. I want to make sure we don't. Yeah, right there. Okay. So what kind of above ground battery UPS applications are there? Well, you guys, believe it or not, scalable modular. We have about 100, between all those mines that we service, there's probably, 150 UPSs that we service. Most of those are the APC Symmetra LX. Yes, there's some 3-phase ones there too, the PX, and there's some component UPSs there, and they're all above ground, and they're in amazing places, like the rod plant, for example, where they're actually bending things and there's a furnace in there. They're in places where kind of like they really shouldn't be from a temperature heat standpoint. Right. But yeah, I mean, those applications are working down there.
So EV Fan asks a question from YouTube.
We skipped one.
Yeah, I did. I intentionally did. I wanted to stay with that thought for a moment. So EV Fan asks, so you guys actually go down into mines to service UPSs? Well, it's rare that you'll find that level of equipment down inside the mine because typically there we're moving earth and rock and ore out. And the machinery typically is large earth-moving machinery. But we do have experience with that. In downtown Phoenix, there's a tunnel called the Deck Park Tunnel. And years ago, the electrical group here was chartered to insert and install an uninterruptible power system down in the tunnel in a basement portion, and its function in life was to monitor and control the water pumps, because this pump or this tunnel was actually below ground, and if you got a serious rainstorm, which we get during monsoon seasons here in Arizona, there was risk for the tunnel filling up with water. So these pumps were actually operating to remove the water from the tunnel, and the UPS was a backup supply for those. And I remember it was quite a project because we had to get rigging and cranes down into the tunnel in order to lift these large 2,000-pound plus UPSs and battery cabinets down into this basement area in the tunnel.
Right.
So yes, we do work at times in those kind of environments, including up on mountaintops. The county here, Maricopa County, has a mountaintop radio transmitter site on the east side here in the East Valley. And the site was pretty much inaccessible for any kind of vehicle traffic. So I remember the county actually chartered helicopters and took our people and equipment up on this mountain site. And we have pictures of it. It's pretty cool having these large military helicopters that can handle freight.
Right.
With a tether cord slowly dropping this heavy equipment down into the site.
Right. We have something similar in Colorado as a Freeport site. It's called Climax. Requires a high clearance 4-wheel drive vehicle to get up on this mountain. Literally have to climb a mountain to get to this mine. Amazing.
So you can pretty much visualize the amount of safety training necessary because not only are you working in an inaccessible place, but you may be in that helicopter. So there's some training there, I'm sure, that was involved. And then the movement of the equipment once it got on.
I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could do the puddle jumper helicopter thing.
Yeah.
I get sick really easy, motion sickness really easy.
Yeah.
Got to keep the boots on the ground for me.
Fear of heights. Yeah, definitely. All right. So another question that comes up from Master King on YouTube. He says, "Does OSHA require a physical exam?"
No, they don't.
That's surprising, actually.
Yeah, they don't.
I'm sure there's certain types of OSHA certifications where a physical exam is necessary. Astronauts, for example, they got to make sure your heart's going to be able to keep up, and that you're physically fit enough. But for the type of work that we've been doing in the mines, you're saying that the physical portion
we
is not
haven't had to do
necessary.
one of those.
Okay.
Oh, what is that? Suns fan for life. With the environment in the mines being very dirty, etc., is there a brand type of UPS that is the most durable that you would recommend for these types of applications? I'm going to default to you because everything they have in there right now, Pete, really, in theory, shouldn't be in there.
Well, yeah, for a brief time, there was a company that was making small UPSs that were weather resistant. Let's put it that way. There are, in the traffic lights, in the intersections, there are usually green boxes that are mounted on those poles that support the lights, the traffic lights. And inside those, you have a bunch of electronics, things that are timing the lights to make sure that you don't get two greens, fail-safes, for example. And, of course, if you have a power outage, which is not impossible, somebody hits the telephone pole and knocks out the power, the light still should function because you have an active active intersection there. So the type of UPSs that they used to put into these little green boxes that were outside were typically the type of UPSs you'd have in your office space, which is environmentally controlled. Well, you put that out into a 110-degree temperature, which is the ambient, and inside that box, it probably got to 130 to 150 because it was sitting there baking in the sun. And these UPSs were dying left and right. The batteries were basically boiling. So, yeah, there was a UPS company, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. It started with an F, that made a weather-resistant or a higher grade UPS that was able to be used in these traffic intersections.
Was the UPS itself outside? Where were the batteries?
Well, they were small enough UPSs where the batteries were inside the UPS.
Okay.
We're talking about 1 kVA, maybe 2 kVA, which was sufficient for the load that was in that instrumentation panel by that traffic, that traffic signal. Now, another, since we're into stories and
Yeah.
I've got some history, there was a crushing mine up north in Nevada called Timet, Timet. And I forget what ore they were crushing, but whatever it was pretty caustic. It was probably sulfur or something like that. And we used to have computers up there, and the computers typically would end up with corrosion on the boards, on the fingers that plug into the sockets, and that was because they were controlling the environment in this computer room to 40%, which was recommended, 40 to 60% humidity. And the reason for that, again, was to maintain static control. Anything in the 40 to 60 range, you're not going to have a lot of static activity, people walking across carpets, zapping the equipment, and killing the process or the computer. Well, the problem was this humidity combined with the dust that was being generated in this crushing operation created a form of sulfuric acid. And it would get on the copper portions of the modules. And I remember it was so bad, you would go to these computers, and they usually had little chrome rings around the push buttons, the on and off buttons, and things like that. It was so bad that the chrome was actually delaminating and peeling off of those rings, those
Wow.
copper rings. So yeah, there are some hostile environments. Now, companies like us that take service agreements, like the company I worked for, Digital, had service agreements on their computers. Once you recognize that there's an elevated risk for that piece of equipment, we either then adjusted the price of that contract to compensate for the amount of failures we were going to get,
Right. Mm-hmm.
or we were unable to offer service agreements in that hostile environment, and it was time and materials repairs only.
Right. Or just a PM only contract.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, let's switch gears a little bit. We talked about mines. Let's switch gears to the government now when it comes to clearances.
Okay.
Very interesting. I'm going to kind of like throw everything together in that category. So, you have counties, you have the city, you have military bases, even jails and police departments. And what's interesting about this one is that some of these entities require a credit check.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're going to check your financial, where you're at financially from a credit score standpoint before they even check your actual background.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess they figure if you can't handle money or you've filed for bankruptcy 3 times, that you're probably not a person they would want to have in their facility. And of course they do the basic background check, but I think it's more than basic. In fact, in the jails, if you have a warrant, they do a background check on you and you have a warrant, guess what?
You get escorted off the site, or you go into the cell.
Exactly. You don't get a leave.
Right.
I mean,
well, the jail was a bad one, but I was going to tell you a story about a bank.
Okay.
This was 30 years ago, so I can safely talk about that now. Employees have differing situations in their life that usually are not or may not be reported to management.
Right.
Well, this was one of those cases. One of our employees that we had sent out a number of times to do data cabling ended up at Downtown Valley National Bank. And they did one of those checks, and they would not allow him to enter because there was an outstanding traffic warrant.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it does happen, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So the background check, the financial check, and then the military bases require a rapid gate pass.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more extensive when you're going into a military base, what they require.
Security clearances
yeah.
primarily, yeah.
Yeah, so our guys have to have that. So this, the point is there is just the scrutiny that's placed on the field engineer, personal things that he has to divulge. And when that comes back negative, we never know what it is. But when they get rejected, and that has happened, there have been a few people, they don't work with us anymore, that have been rejected. You don't know why, but it just comes back that way.
Yeah.
But the majority of our guys, the guys on our staff right now, aren't having any problem with any of that. You mentioned the bank. The other thing added to is the fingerprinting.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get a chance to really delve into that. What's that all about? Do you know?
I don't. I didn't know they were doing that out on site before they would allow employees to enter a facility to do work.
Yeah, just in the banking, on the Federal Reserve specifically.
Oh,
is,
okay. At that level, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I do remember Valley National Bank had a processing center on I-17 here around the Honeywell plant, around Dunlap or so, and very strict security, and they had man traps literally. They
Mhm.
were these stainless steel rods, and they spun, and you went in between one of those, and once you were inside, it wasn't easy to get outside unless you were cleared. And it was always spooky going into something like that, thinking, what if there's a fire? What if they can't open? What if the power quits and the man
Yeah.
trap won't operate and
Yeah.
it's flooding or something? You know,
Pete, you spent some really good years at Digital, right?
yeah.
I mean, what they were doing the same thing back then, or was it looser?
No, it was the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it depended on the customer. I remember working at the American Express building or facility up at the Valley National Bank Tower downtown. They were up on a 26th floor, I think, and very strict, stringent requirements because they had money laying around at times,
Mm-hmm. Very
and
interesting.
tellers, and so yeah, security background checks were critical.
Okay, we have another comment here by the Master King. MSHA, facial hair in the face ceiling area is unacceptable. Great point, Master King. Thank you. Okay,
So
yeah.
that means our employees are going to have to shave.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard's shaking his head. He's going, I ain't going in there.
Hey, I got a story
Not
there.
a chance.
Hey, I have a story there. Since we're on beards,
Yeah.
Mike Rillo, you know who Mike Rillo is.
Yeah.
He's been with us 10 years, field engineer. When I interviewed Mike 10 years ago, you remember the ZZ Top band?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Remember their beards?
Oh, the Civil War beards.
Oh,
yeah.
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 Mike's beard was to the floor.
Yeah.
I'm not, no exaggeration. It was a beautiful beard,
Mhm.
just beautiful. And I told him in the interview, I go, that is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen from a facial hair standpoint, just well maintained everything. And I go, Mike, you realize you're going to have to cut that off if you come work for us. He goes, I know. He goes, I know. That's part of the job.
He was prepared to do that after
Yes.
15 years of growing a
Exactly.
beard. Wow.
Absolutely gorgeous beard. Yes.
Very dedicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's obvious. Machine shops, for example. I was working on a lathe this morning, and if you're wearing a tie, if you've got a beard like that, it can get sucked up in that rotating chunk of metal.
Loose
And
clothing too.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's some very strict requirements for certain kinds of businesses that we go into.
Yeah. And just a few other things to add. I have it classified as other training, first aid training,
Mhm.
CPR, lockout, tag out, all those various things. Got to have a fire extinguisher.
Mhm.
That's mandatory. In fact, when you go to a mine, they actually check to see whether or not you have these things. They stop you, not all the time, but sometimes, especially when MSHA is actually on the site, they're going to stop you. They're going to make sure that you're chalking your wheels, all those different things these guys are subjected to. So I take my hat off to our field engineering team.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it requires a lot of training to be up to speed on all of those things, so they're not in violation once they get out on site.
Yeah. All right, Pete, ready to switch gears to threats?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Jesse, there's a slide I have over there that's, I can't remember what
Rogue threat.
Yeah, rogue threats. And you're going to have to expand that one a little bit to the bottom where you see the 15 threats down there. Now, we spent a great deal of time in past podcasts talking about blackouts, but there's so many other things that could equally, cause a problem.
I can bring it up for you here too, Claude. Let's do it on this screen as well. Over here, and pull that up. So you're looking for these down here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And let's skip around a little bit because I know we have some really, really good stories on number 4. Look at that one there, Pete. Thieves stealing copper. Major stories here, firsthand stories here at our site with that phenomena taking place on multiple occasions. You got any great stories there on that?
I do. And it's always painful when you're hit by the copper thieves. One day years ago, in the middle of the night, our IT manager got all kinds of alarms that our data center was extremely hot and the servers were shutting down and services were being, suspended. So he drove up here, and I don't know, it was early morning, 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and our data center was 120 degrees plus. Again, computer room air conditioning or computer room air handling is designed to draw off heat. And It's dedicated and it's 24/7, unlike people Comfort Air, which is only running when people are there or if it's hot outside or cold outside or whichever. So we did a bit of research and found that the condenser on the south side of the building, outside on a slab, had been hit by copper thieves. And what these idiots actually did was, there are little copper pipes that go on the outside of this aluminum condenser. They painstakingly snipped 2 inches of copper, a little U-shaped piece of copper, and probably collected $25 worth of copper, spending most of the night killing our AC unit.
Yeah, and you caught these guys on video, right? Because at that time we had
that was
cameras.
another one. No, that was
Okay.
another one. Yeah,
Okay.
this was. But anyway, so it took us at least a day and a half without any computer support, knocking down a building that houses typically 150 people that were unable to work because of these copper thieves. The one that we caught on video was a guy that pulled out in front of our main building, hooked a chain around our backflow valve. In the grassy area, there was some 2-inch copper pipe, probably about 3 feet wide or so, that came up to a brass backflow valve, which the city requires you to have checked every year to make sure that your building is not sending water back downstream into the water supply. So he hooks this chain around there, drives off in the middle of the night, rips out, a bunch of copper pipe, puts it in his truck and takes off. Again, he collected maybe $100 worth of copper and shut down our building.
Yeah.
Again, no one could work the next day. There was no water. There were no facilities. And so that affected operations big time.
Yeah. And just to get back with everybody on what we're talking about here, these are the threats. There's 15 of them. We're not going to cover them all. But these are threats that can interrupt the flow and distribution of electricity. One that a lot of people don't think about is number 6. The animals out there, squirrels and raccoons chew through a wire or wander into the wrong areas. This actually has personally happened to me with a vehicle, leaving it parked on the street. Rat came and chewed through the wires. You go start your vehicle and you wonder why it doesn't work. Turns out that there was damage underneath. So this isn't strange, but it's just often not thought about when it comes to a mission critical operation. Number 10, Mylar balloon. You know what a Mylar balloon is, Pete? Drifts into power lines.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know what? I got a slide that I'd like to put up there on the Mylar balloon. For those of you who don't know, you can go buy one of these in a Fry's. It's a Happy Valentine's balloon. Happy birthday. It has helium in it. Raise your hand if you've let one of those go and looked to see how high it could get up in the sky. I know I certainly have. And you know what? They disappear, but sometimes they get tangled up, on power lines and cause interruptions, problems. So Jesse, if you can put that slide up real quick, we're going to track a Mylar balloon. This phenomena occurred about a year ago, I believe.
The attack balloon?
Yes. We're going to bring our audience into this one. Okay, look at this. Is it politically correct to call this a spy balloon, or should I call it a surveillance balloon? What sounds better?
Probably unknown would be more accurate.
Okay, unknown. Well, for those of you who keep up with current events, this was the Chinese unknown balloon that flew across North America over the course of about 2 weeks. And guess what? It wasn't sighted until you see the first yellow dot there. Okay, to the left. You start with the left. That was the first person that saw this thing. And
now, as soon as Claude told me that, I said, where the hell is NORAD? Do we not have air defense systems? Something this large, the size of a house, was able to cross the ocean, head toward land, go partially across our continent, and nobody noticed except for a hiker?
Yeah, and it didn't cause a single interruption. That's what's amazing about this, all the way up until the first yellow dot. And the person that spotted this thing was hiking on a backcountry trail, happened to look up into the sky and saw something that was strange, reported it, and it turned out to be this balloon right here. Now, personally, I've hiked a lot of backcountry trails, and about at mile number 6, I'm like squinting. I can't see 10 yards in front of me sometimes, but this person saw this balloon. These things fly 50,000 feet up in the air, and this thing was spotted. So you can see it flew across Alaska, Montana, and it was finally detected. And then this thing was shot down in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina nearly a week and a half later, okay, causing all sorts of interruptions. So to connect back, I'm just using this as a prop. But I do have a question for our audience, and I'd like for you all to chime in, and we'll see. If you were in charge, would you have captured this balloon, or would you have shot the damn thing down? Okay, you have two choices, and I need a reason as to why you would capture it or shoot it down. And we'll just move on from there. So number 5 there, Pete, blown fuse at a substation transformer is another source of interruption that could potentially happen. A bird flies into, causing a short circuit. Lightning strike, we've talked about a bunch of times. Storms blow branches and limbs down that crash into power lines. We see that all the time in the Northeast. You turn on the TV during the winter, that's like constantly happening. The power is out. People got to come out and restore the power. Sometimes that takes weeks to do. So, but they have fireplaces in the Northeast, right? You lived there. You lived in New York. They have fireplaces.
Yeah, we had a potbelly stove actually. Kept us
Yeah.
warm. Yeah.
3-car. This one right here got me. I still don't completely understand it. A 3-car collision strikes a utility pole. Why does it have to be 3 cars?
Yeah, good point. Wouldn't one have done the same thing? Most
Yes.
likely, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Failure of an underground cable.
Happens, yeah.
Equipment failure.
Well, let me give
Yeah.
you an example.
Yeah.
Again, many years ago. See how old I am? 30 years ago, guys. We were happily running in Building A. Computers are running, everybody's working, phones are operating, and suddenly all our infrastructure shuts down. So we look around, we go in a data center where we can't find what the cause was. It
Can I
looked
ask you
like,
one question?
yeah,
You said everything shut down.
everything
Every-
being all of our infrastructure, phones, computers, yeah, anything. I mean, the rest of it was running. Water
Okay.
was running.
And your
all the
lights
rest.
were on, right?
Yeah, the
Okay.
lights were on.
All
Power
right.
was okay. So anyway, I walk outside the front of the building, and I'm thinking, what was it? An asteroid? You know, was it the Soviets at the
Asteroid.
time? You know, shooting missiles or something? And I look across the street, and there's some guys over there putting in some irrigation lines, and I see a guy with a trencher, you know, going like this. So I walk over, and I see that he's making a real nice trench for those irrigation lines. And I look down, he's got like a 3-foot hole. And in front of him was a cable about 3 inches in diameter that was chewed through with wires dangling everywhere. What he did was he hit the main 400 pair telephone line and just kept right on going. Now, he was very lucky
Mm-hmm.
because another 1.5 feet down was a 14,000 volt power line. And he probably wouldn't have survived that, you know?
Yeah.
The phone line was no problem. But yeah, that shut us down for at least a couple of days or so.
Did you make the intervention when you saw that? You said you walked up to this guy and observed what he did?
He didn't speak English.
Oh,
So, well, at
Yeah.
least he pretended not to at that point in time.
yeah.
So I got a hold of the phone number on his van, and it was a team of people actually.
Mm-hmm.
And but that didn't matter. They weren't going to be able to fix it. At that point, we had to get the utilities involved, which at that time was Quest.
Okay.
But yeah, that happens. And sometimes you get failures, like you mentioned, a fuse in a step-down transformer. We've lost fuses at least a half a dozen times, and it's not because of any event. It's just that they failed.
Yeah. And see, everything you're saying, you were able to identify the cause why.
Eventually,
Okay.
yeah, it wasn't immediate, but
Right.
yes, yeah, eventually.
Well, here's a scenario if you look at number 14, the power goes out and no one knows why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, when do you actually figure it out? What the power-
Well, if the truck that hit the telephone pole was over on 19th Avenue 2 miles away, then yeah, you're never going to find out. All you're going to do is, get APS to admit that, yeah, there's an outage in your area. We're working on it, and we'll let you know when it's back up.
Right. Well, look at this. Petty LaBelle.
Petty, though. It's not
Yeah.
the Patti LaBelle that
The
we're,
singer.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the disco days.
Yeah.
She great routine.
Okay, Petty LaBelle says to shoot it down because it's a good target, because it's good target practice. Okay, there's one.
Hmm.
Flying solo. Shoot it down. Blow it out of the sky. Arnold Schwarzenegger would have destroyed it with no question. Okay, EV fan. capture it, reverse engineer and see what data it was collecting, plus check it for advanced camo or whatever, kept it hidden. You know what? That's exactly what I would have done. I scratch my head to this day. Don't we have the technology and the capability to capture something like this to see if it actually was recording
Mhm.
our missile silos?
Right. And of course, now that they shot it down just off the coast so that it wouldn't create any property damage off South Carolina, I think it
Yes.
was. And has anyone heard anything about what they found?
No.
No, not a thing, right? So conspiracy theorists, have your moment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Not a thing.
I'm sure they know, and I'm sure they've discussed it with the people that sent it and decided that keeping it quiet is the best course of action at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Slim Jim captured to possibly discover intel or working equipment to analyze. Sun's fan for life, shoot it down before it hit the mainland so it couldn't transmit any pictures in real time of our military bases, for example. And then Starseed captured for the same reason as the EV fan.
All right, so we've got a bunch of people weighing
Yeah.
in on this.
I'm liking the captured thing. I'm really, really digging that.
Yeah.
And Pete and Claude, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull the picture back up. For number 6, Claude, you were talking about the squirrels and raccoons and stuff.
Yeah.
Pete, you want to grab that thing that our guest sent us down on the ground over there?
Absolutely.
This is from one of our other podcasts.
Okay.
Go.
What is this? This is a, mouse out wiring protection. That's interesting.
When we were talking about a Tesla Roadster that was compromised because rodents got into the running board and the camera quit working and it had other problems, it turns out that there's a soy-based insulating insulation on certain types of wire, and which mice and rodents like, and they also like building nests down in these things. So we had a customer, George, who said, there's a product that you can actually spray that will prevent that from ever occurring again. So he suggested we spray that into the cavities if we have one that has some rodent activity, most likely thinking that it's going to go back into the same hazardous environment that it came from.
This isn't flammable at all, right?
Don't know.
Jesse, this isn't flammable, is it?
Not sure. We can look more into that. I know that
Yeah.
this is made specifically for vehicles and engine cavities and stuff like that, but
Okay.
I'm not 100%.
Because you know where my mind's going with this, with wiring and things like that. So,
Well, I think the best rodent preventer or rodent control device that I ever bought was at a garage sale. And I laughed my head off when I read the instructions on it. It was actually in a little box, and it was called tiger urine. And they claimed it was highly effective. I guess these little critters will be able to extrapolate the odor to what animal created it.
so it's actually tiger.
It was actually tiger urine,
Okay.
yeah, granulated, and it had that odor. So, anyway, that I guess that's another option.
Interesting.
But
Very
who's going to milk the tiger for that, right? I mean, that's a job I would not want.
Mm-mm.
No.
No. All right. So, Pete, why don't we go into this battery history a little bit?
Sure.
And here's one of the reasons why I've employed Pete to do this, because when you look at battery history, some of the names of some of these people back in the day had 10 syllables, and there's absolutely no way that I can pronounce that. Pete, this stuff just flows off of his tongue. Listen to him pronounce these guys' names. Amazing.
All right. Volta.
Well, I can do that one. Volta, I can do
I
that
got you
one.
on that one. Well, he was the guy that invented the battery. Now, what Claude's talking about, we used to have a power class here, and Claude went through one of those. And you're right, they were all foreigners. They had long, lengthy names. Now, Nikola Tesla is probably one of the simple ones too. And I'm trying to think one of the really hard ones here.
It was like Swang, something like that.
Well, but for today's discussion, we're going to talk about Volta, Alessandro. Now, the
go.
first name is tough. All right, I agree with you. If we can pop up an image there, Jesse, and it is 1-AAA, and then from there we'll go forward alphabetically. What I'm going to show you is the history of batteries, and it's attributed in 1800 to the Italian physicist Alessandro Volta. And he invented what has been traditionally considered the first electric battery when he stacked several pairs of alternating copper and zinc discs separated by a cloth that was soaked in salt water.
And what year was this again?
1800.
1800.
Yeah, so we're talking, a long time ago,
Mhm.
200 years plus. But it turns out that with any discovery, they don't quite know what to do with it, and then the applications come. AI is going through the same phase right now. We see the phenomena, we see its capabilities, and we're now scrambling to find an application for it. See, I had to insert some AI in there, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it turns out that this 1800 invention by Alessandro Giuseppe Antonio Anastasio Volta,
See, there
that was
you
the whole
go.
name there, right? Was not the first battery. There's another picture, Jesse. Let's bring up that 1-AAA.
That's the Bagdad Battery?
That is called, the Baghdad Battery. Apparently, some German researchers, or let's see, find this here. They were digging around in Iraq, around the Tower of Babel. And apparently there was an advanced civilization back in the day, probably the ones that built the tower. Think of it, that's quite a construction feat. How do you do that without backhoes and cranes and, concrete?
That's
and
what makes
all of
it
that?
amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Back in the days of the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of mystery there. But so anyway, they were digging around that area and they found this clay copper cylinder surrounded with an iron rod, and this jar showed signs of corrosion and seemed to have once contained mild acid, such as vinegar or wine. Which
So
they
this was a
certainly had.
relic they found.
This was a relic, yeah,
Okay.
and they were trying to figure out, what is this relic? What was its purpose? It's the same thing they're going to do 1,000 years from now when they're digging through our landfills and they find a toilet seat and they're going to say, was this a neck ornament? What was this? So anyway, this discovery was traced then back to around 250 BC. That was before Christ.
Yes.
That was over 1,000 years ago. And they feel that with the addition of what they commonly had back then, which was vinegar, which is an acid, that this would have actually produced electricity. So without proof, and they found no wires, by the way, next to it, and they certainly didn't find any kind of electronic devices that they could have powered with this battery. So the conjecture is maybe they were doing acupuncture, or they merely had a phenomena device that they were trying to impress deity, or they even talk about their idols, because they used to worship idols back then.
Yeah, Pete, what's the gray area circumference? What is that? Do you know what material that is?
They say that it was clay.
Okay.
And then it looks like it was lined with iron, and then the center portion, you can see the color there, that would be the copper part.
Okay, yeah.
Now, a typical battery consists of zinc and copper, or just lead, and you have an exchange of electrons. So by pouring acid down into this vinegar, this thing actually produced 1.1 volts. So anyway, that's the picture that shows what is possibly the first battery. Now, let's go to the picture that's 2-G.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, that's
and
Benjamin.
And that is not AI generated. I
No.
can tell you that.
No, that was probably a, what they used to call those, engraving back then. Yeah, and of course, AI would do a great job of this.
Wait, Pete, which one did you say?
It's actually not this, but since we have it up, let's talk about Benjamin Franklin. Do you see what he's doing there? This is that famous story where there's a kite up in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
There's some dark thunder clouds, and he's got a wire connected to this kite, and he's actually going to allow that wire to then touch what's called a Leyden jar. A Leyden jar is a device that acts like a capacitor, and it actually stores electricity, just like a capacitor or like a battery, except it's short-term like a capacitor. So that was a picture of Benjamin experimenting with electricity. Now, this engraving, although it was accurate in its portrayal, had he really been out there in a thunderstorm with a kite up in the air with a metal wire reaching down to him and holding it, he would have been charcoal by that first lightning strike, because lightning is looking for the easiest path to ground, and a conductive wire heading up, that far higher than the trees would have made him a lightning magnet.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately, he survived. I'm sure this experiment was unsuccessful, because if it was, he would not be here today. And the kid probably grew up to be a physicist or something. So now we have the, if we can go to the voltaic pile. Here it shows Alessandro Volta's invention, and you can see those discs, and he does have wires, plus and minus there. And this was in 1800. His
You
lifespan
need a
was...
different image up there, Pete.
Oh,
Yeah. There.
okay.
Yeah, it's the one.
It is 2-G.
Yeah.
And then if we can go forward from there in alphabetical order, they'll show up in the right sequence.
Well, I mean, we're going in alphabetical order right now.
Okay. So 2-G, there's the voltaic pile. There's a picture of Alessandro, and I won't do the full name again because they don't. No, they do. All right. Alessandro, Giuseppe, Antonio, Anastasio, Volta.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Rolls right off the tongue. This guy probably would be driving a Ferrari if he was alive today. So he was born in 1745, died in 1827. You know, they had short lifespans back then. All right, so continuing now, the next image is going to be batteries-AA1, and then we go forward from there. Advance mine here. All right, so battery voltage. So they are DC voltage. There's no such thing as an AC battery. AC is alternating current, and it's great for magnetics and transformers and stepping voltages up and down. But when you want to store electricity, you can't store AC. So you have to revert to DC. And this is the problem with electric vehicles. In order to store any amount of energy, you have to have 1,200 pounds in a Tesla Model S of DC battery in order to go 220, 250
Amazing.
miles.
Yeah.
And it has a plus and minus polarity. AC has no polarity because it changes 60 times a second. It goes plus minus 60 times a second, that fast. Now, again, batteries are ideal for storing. All batteries use DC current voltages. DC does not change polarity or alternate. Voltage is electromotive force or potential difference. Voltage can be increased by connecting them in series, and we'll show that later on, how batteries in series will actually increase the voltage but keep the amperage the same. And the problem with DC voltage, and here's where Nikola Tesla and Thomas Alva Edison were at odds. It turns out Thomas Alva Edison was a DC proponent because he didn't know how to do AC. He actually hired Nikola Tesla to do that for him, and whereas Tesla was into AC. So DC voltage is less efficient for long-distance transmission. So picture this, in New York at the time, which is where Thomas Alva Edison was, they were generating power at Niagara Falls, which is 500 miles away. In order to get DC voltage from Niagara Falls to New York, it would be down to zero, even by the time it got to Rochester, upstate New York, because you have such a large line loss. And if you make the voltage too high, well, then you get arcing and you get, you know. So AC is definitely a more advantageous voltage for long-distance transmission. So let's go to the next image.
Just so you know, we are at an hour.
Okay. So the next image is amp hours.
Amp hours, yeah.
All right. There are two ways that batteries are. Hang on, not getting my image here now. There we go. All right. Amp hour capacity is how battery energy is rated. And UPS batteries come in different amp hour ratings. The smallest one we have, I think, is a 6 amp hour rating.
That's correct.
12 volt, 6 amp hour. The largest one is what, 140?
140.
Okay. At 7 amp hours, a 7 amp hour battery can supply 7 amps of power for 1 hour. It's that simple. So a 140 amp hour battery will give you 140 amp hours for an hour, or if you're using it for, and you're only drawing 1 amp, then you multiply that hour by 140 and you're getting 140 hours of current or power energy, right? So amp hours is the amount of energy over time. The higher the amp hour rating, the larger the battery, and they physically get large. They get heavy.
Yeah.
And then amp hours are increased by connecting batteries in parallel. If you connect batteries in series, you increase the voltage, keep the amp hour the same. If you connect it in parallel, you increase the amp hours or double the amp hours, but the voltage remains the same. And in a UPS string, typically batteries are connected in series. And the reason for that is the inverters accept more than 12 volts. In a small UPS, yeah, maybe 12, 24 volts. But in a large UPS, it's far more efficient to use higher voltages, DC voltages, because now your breakers and your switches and your disconnect products are much smaller. Smaller amperage, higher voltage. Typical string voltages in a UPS. The smaller UPSs are 120 volts DC, 240 volts for the larger ones, up to 480 volts DC. After that, it gets pretty unsafe for the other technicians working on the battery strings.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next image is going to be battery types. And we'll probably continue this discussion.
Yeah, that's a good cutoff right there.
And we'll talk about the 4 different types of batteries that are manufactured. And the ones we're going to mostly be dealing with are the starter batteries, which are the type of battery used in UPSs and in cars. And that's why it's called a starter battery. They have thinner plates. They can deliver more amperage quickly, which is exactly what you want in a data center. When your power drops out, you want maximum power for the duration of your ride through. And next week, we'll talk about gel cells, wet cells, deep cycle cells, what the reason for those are, why gel cells were created. It had to do with the FAA, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And what the next generation gel cell is, which is, again, what's used in UPSs, which are absorbent glass mat batteries.
Yeah, and just to add, Pete will be not with us.
Oh, that's right.
The next few weeks. He's going to be on vacation with his family in Europe. So we're going to have a special guest next week. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but we'll be on at 10 a.m. on Friday, and we'll have a special guest here.
And one final thing, so we can get rid of the props here, because these have been here for 3 weeks now. We wanted to tell everybody in the Gruber Power Services field, or our GPS customers, our critical power customers, that another sister division here manufactures data cabling products that go in data centers. Not only do we offer UPSs and computer room AC units and access floor for your data centers, but we also have data cabling type products. And what they manufacture next door is, these are fiber cables, for example. This is an LC to LC duplex fiber cable. We also manufacture cable management products, things like this cable management panel, which actually is a brand new product that we just came out with. This is the Space Saver cable management panel. Normally, these cable management rings are about 6 inches tall. Sometimes these are twice the height. This is a 1U. We have 2U on up to 7U for larger type of cable orientation. And typically the way something like this works, this mounts in a 19-inch rack cabinet or a like an open-faced rack. And then you have servers, you have routers, and you have switches that all connect to either fiber or to category cables. And to manage all those cables, what this product does is it allows you to run multiple cables through these rack systems so that you can manage your data cabling and troubleshoot easily. This product was just developed by us a few weeks ago, and we're now offering this Space Saver cable management panel. For those of you interested, if you go to the Gruber.com website, there will be a communication product site, and that's where you can find product like this that goes in a data center right alongside your UPSs and critical power.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, that puts a wrap on it for this week, Pete. And thank you guys for watching. We appreciate the participation. Tell your colleagues about the podcast. So, we want people to subscribe. We want more interaction, more involvement.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I won't see you next week, but our team here will.
Yes. All right. Goodbye, everyone.